on the road again. We can't wait to get on the road again. Telling stories to our family and our friends. We can't wait to get on the road again. On the road again. We can't wait to get on the road again. Telling stories to our friends. We can't wait to get on the road again.
Welcome to our monthly AAA podcast, Affinity, Allie, and Annette on the road to good storytelling with your host, Allie Spooner and moi. We're delighted to have Katie Peck with us today.
So happy to be here in good company.
And this month, we'll be talking about ranch books and ranch living. So we have Katie here with us, who has several romances, many books on a ranch setting. So it's something that you enjoy quite a bit. And she's also known for her award-winning plays, among other things.
All right. So following our podcast, we'll upload to a newly created YouTube channel and hope you consider subscribing so you never miss a future podcast.
Okay, so let me introduce Katie to you. As an author, Katie Peck brings to her books a broad range of life experience, beginning with her early years growing up on a Texas farm and ranch. She has served as an officer in the U.S. Naval Reserve, been a frontline journalist on newspapers in Texas and Oklahoma, and successfully operated a consulting business serving the nonprofit sector. She was one of the founders of Outstanding Amarillo, which served the LGBTQIA plus populations of the Texas Panhandle at a time when persecution of such individuals was the norm. Other experiences include over 10 years of proud service as a volunteer firefighter and EMS first responder. Her writing successes include her novels Good Water, The Ladies' Room, Kiva and the Mosque, second edition, Prairie Fire, The Pyramid and the Painting, The Past and the Present, and Broken, all with Sapphire Books, as well as out-of-print Folsom Boy. Peck has published one biography, Friend of the Hills, the story of Truman Tucker, and hundreds of articles, short stories, and poems, including serving as inaugural poet laureate for the city of Las Vegas. Both Good Water and Kiva and the Mosque were finalists in the New Mexico Arizona Book Awards, and she has had two winning plays, The Phone Call and Give a Shit Repair Shop, in the Rocky Mountain Voices competition. Her latest play, Sheltered Women, took top honors at the New Mexico AACT Fest and received a special award for excellence in playwriting at the 5-state region VIAACT Fest. Peck is also an actress and director. She is currently executive director of Nat Gold Players in Las Vegas, New Mexico.
So, that was a mouthful. That's a lot of letters you had there. I'm impressed. You did good. Without further ado, Katie, if you're ready, take it away.
I am ready and eager. I believe today that you have invited me to read from Broken, which is my latest novel. And it is just a brief background on it. It's about a naval officer, career naval officer, injured by an IED in Iraq, and she comes home to the family ranch after she's lost everything. And this particular piece is a very critical moment as she returns to the ranch. Mel stood beside the ancient boxcar that had served as the Morris Ranch tack room since long before she was born. The key to the padlock was in her hand, retrieved from the nail on the backside of a railroad tie that served as part of the foundation of a now wheelless railroad car. Mel felt surprised when she saw the shiny new lock and matching stainless steel key. She loved the old padlock with an 1893 date stamped on it. Even as a child, she had felt connection with her grandfather and great-grandfather every time she used that lock. Guess the old thing finally gave up the ghost, she thought. She would have felt silly explaining to Hoyt why her heart pounded and sweat covered her palms as she gathered the courage to open the door. It was such a small thing in the maelstrom of her current life, but she didn't know if her heart could handle one more grief. It was too fractured and frail to risk it, but she had to know. At some level, it felt like her father stood at her side, patiently waiting for her to do what needed doing. Go on, Melinda girl, she could imagine her father saying. The worrying is worse than the facing. The memory of that voice comforted her. She closed her eyes, remembering one of the best days of her life. Inserted here is a flashback to when her father gave her, when she was a child, and her father had a handmade saddle made just for her. It had been 10 years since she had last ridden that saddle. She was on leave, and even Zadab had managed vacation time for them to spend the whole 2 weeks back on the New Mexico ranch. Before that, every time she visited home, she'd oiled and cleaned the saddle, wishing she had a place to keep it where she lived, but it belonged on the ranch. A piece of herself she'd left behind. A lot could happen in 10 years to aging leather and dry climate. She expected the fenders would curl and likely cracks in the leather. Taking a deep breath, Mel shoved the key in the lock, then lifted the mechanism that held the door shut. It moved smoothly as she wrestled the heavy door open. She stepped inside, her eyes not yet adjusted to the darkness, until her hand found the chain that hung from the base of one bare bulb hanging from the ceiling. She pulled the chain, and a sparse light filled the interior. One long saddle rack held all the Morris family saddles. Hoyt's saddle now rested at the front, nearest the door, followed by a saddle each for Hoyt's 3 kids. She looked down the rack, spotting the last 2 saddles, her father's, and right beside it, her barrel racing saddle. She walked to it, unable to really determine its condition from a distance. As she reached it and placed her hand on the leather, she gasped in surprise. Subtle and clean, the leather was in perfect condition. She grasped it by the horn and lifted it slightly. The fleece underneath looked nearly brand new. The enormity of what she saw took Mel's breath away. She realized that no matter where she went, no matter how far she sailed, her family never forgot her, never stopped loving her. Wordlessly, that love was now apparent in a saddle, a gift from a father long dead. Mel caressed the leather. She leaned close and inhaled deeply. Neat's foot oil, she thought. No wonder no mice had touched it. Nothing better than neat's foot oil to soften, preserve, and protect. The fear of what she'd find had turned to joy. Mel sighed deeply, then walked to turn out the light, step outside, and close the door. Replacing the padlock and key as she did so. Once outside, she pulled the cell phone from her back pocket. Looking at the screen, she wandered around the yard until she finally found a sweet spot with 3 bars of signal. She dialed the number from her address list. Hey, Hoyt, she said as the call was answered. Thanks for taking care of my saddle. Aren't much. Dad did it until he died. When he cleaned his saddle, he just did yours too. After he went, Sammy and I, we just kept up the practice. Speaking of Sammy, Mel said, referring to her youngest nephew, do you think he'd mind if I started riding Old Blue? Not at all. You seen that bald-faced sorrel he trained from the colt? Old Blue could use the exercise. Sammy don't ride him no more. Mel smiled, remembering helping saddle train Old Blue as a colt when she was on leave after officer candidate school. The blue roan had made full circle in the life of the ranch horse, from colt to seasoned cow horse to old gentle for kids and experienced riders, and now the family cripple, she thought. She had her saddle and a horse. I've really come home, she thought.
All right.
That's it. Mm-hmm.
Very good.
Very
Yeah.
good.
We're going to definitely talk about that book a little bit later because it was interesting. There were lots of tropes in that, different tropes.
Yep. Different angles
So,
for sure.
yeah.
Uh-huh.
So, Allie, you ready to read from Sullivan's Trace, your latest book?
All right. Absolutely. As Annette said, this is from Sullivan's Trace. It just came out October 1st. Much like Kayt's character, Mel, Micah Sullivan has returned to the family horse ranch to take over from her father, who has now passed away. So she is basically in charge of keeping the family business of raising champion quarter horse cutting horses going. So we'll pick up a couple of chapters in, Sully woke to the first rays of sunlight peeking through her window. She dressed and went to the kitchen to fix a light breakfast before walking to the barn where her four-wheeler sat waiting. Sully picked up a small bag of dry dog food, dropped it into the passenger seat, and climbed behind the wheel. She pulled out of the barn and drove past the corral down a path leading to a back pasture where the mares and young foals were kept. Sully turned off the trail into a wooded section of land and followed the track for several minutes before it opened into a clearing. She pulled the vehicle next to an ancient oak stump, took out the bag of dog food, and dumped it into a small metal tub. She stepped back to the ATV, drove forward a few hundred feet, and parked beneath a tree to wait. As anticipated, her wait was not long. Sully propped her feet on the dash as she listened for the slight sound of tiny feet on the dry sticks of the forest floor. The morning breeze was cool, and the forest sounds were carried along the air. She smiled with delight as she watched the mother fox appear in the clearing, her nose lifted to smell the offering Sully had left for her. She cautiously left the protection of the forest and was followed by a pair of fox pups, jostling along behind her. She quickly trotted to the tub and began to eat the food Sully had left for her. Sully had spotted the female fox nearly a year before, and after seeing her numerous times, began to supplement her diet with dry dog food. Slowly, the fox became used to seeing her, Sully, and would allow her to remain in the area while she came out to feed. Several months ago, the female was nowhere to be seen when Sully came out to bring food, but each time she visited, the food had disappeared. Sully breathed a sigh of relief once she saw the fox carefully herding two small pups ahead of her. She had grown thin, the strain of feeding pups draining her strength, so Sully began bringing a larger bag of food for her more often. The mother ate greedily while the pups romped around the stump. Sully enjoyed watching them play and was amazed at how quickly they grew. She leaned forward and her foot slipped on the dash, creating a sound the pups heard. They stopped dead in their tracks, their bodies falling flat to the ground, and the mother lifted her head to look at the source of the sound. She spotted Sully sitting quietly in the small vehicle again, made a soft woofing sound to her pups. They were reassured by their mother's communication and resumed their playing. Sully smiled. The mother fox had made her day by giving her the sign that she trusted her caretaker enough not to send her pups scrambling for safety. Sully watched the fox eat her fill and lift her head to look directly at her, and for a moment she locked gazes with the animal, who appeared to smile at Sully. With another quick bark to her pups, the fox spun on her hind legs and trotted back into the woods. She stuffed the sack into a pocket in the dash and turned the key to start the engine. Sully drove down the small trail and continued to the foal pasture. She pulled into the middle of the field and parked as a herd of golden animals approached. 24 mares with foals of varying ages circled the vehicle, and Sully admired the beautiful animals that surrounded her. The sun playing on the golden coats brightened the morning as Sully reached into her pocket and withdrew a knife. She walked to the rear of the vehicle, cut open a bag of apples, and began slicing the ripened fruit to indulge the young horses with a sweet treat. The foals surrounded her as she crowded in close for sampling of the gifts she had to offer. Sully found great joy in working with the animals from birth to mold their temperament and bond them to the human touch. She fed them sliced apples and ran her hands over their shoulders and down their legs. And for the older foals, Sully began leaning across their backs to get them used to bearing human weight. She quickly found herself lost among the horses. Bryn joined her grandfather and Camille in the kitchen for breakfast as promised. Doc looked up and smiled when she entered the room. "Good morning. I hope you slept well," he said. Bryn returned his smile. "I haven't slept that well in ages," she admitted. "There's nothing like fresh country air to help you sleep at night," Camille added. "Would you like coffee?" "I would love a cup." "I'll take a refill too," Doc said. Camille picked up his empty cup and shook her head. "It's a good thing you got here when you did, or he would have drained the pot," she said. "I'm just a one-cup person, sometimes two, and then I switch to juice or water," Bryn said. "Is apple still your favorite?" Camille asked. Bryn smiled at the thought of Camille remembering the fact. "Yes, it is," she said, smiling with Camille. "What would you like for breakfast? I think a few slices of bacon are left, and I can have toast and eggs ready in a few minutes," Camille offered. Some toast and bacon will be just fine, Bryn said. You better eat up. It'll be a long time until lunch, Doc said. Very well. I will have some soft scrambled eggs, Bryn said, much to Camille's delight. That's better. I thought we would stop for you to meet Sully and check our mayor before heading off to make other rounds today, Doc said. Bryn sipped her coffee as her grandfather spoke. That sounds like a good start. Camille delivered a plate of eggs, toast, and bacon with a glass of chilled apple juice. Thanks, Camille, she said. You're very welcome, Camille said as she sat at the table. Are we still heading to the office this morning? Bryn asked. I thought we would run by and check to see if we have any appointments, and then drop by next door to check on Sully's mayor and the rest of the stock. Bryn noticed a scowl on Doc's face. That colt she's expecting has me worried. Why is that? Because he's going to be large at birth, especially if the mayor goes full term in another few weeks, Doc said. Will he be too large for a natural birth? Bryn asked. That's not what I'm sure of. The mare's from good breeding stock, and this will be her third foal, but I still can't help but worry. Bryn took the last bite of breakfast and washed it down with juice. Well, let's go to the office, and then we can check on the mayor, she said as she rose to carry her dishes to the sink. Leave those, and I'll get them, Camille said. Thanks for the great breakfast. Let me brush my teeth, and I'll be ready to go, Bryn said as she passed her grandfather. I'll get the truck warmed up, Doc said as he walked to the front door.